And welcome back to the Black Psychologist Podcast, episode 20. I am one half of your humble and gracious host and clinician here for your listening pleasure, Dr. Kyle Osborne. And I appreciate you being here and listening and watching. But of course, I'm never here by myself. I'm here with, he's a hustler, baby. He just wants you to know, and where he's not where he's been, but where he's about to go. The Heartbreak Kid himself, Dr. Jason Coleman. How are you, good brother?
I'm good, man. I can't complain. It was a rainy day out here in Jersey, but a good one nonetheless. So, what's
Yeah,
good with
man.
you though? How you been, bro?
I'm cool, man. I'm cooler now. Like you saying, this heat wave was pretty wild. Like it was hot as hell these past 3 days. So
Yeah,
I'm
man.
happy.
This is
You know, the rain
I
came through and
forgot
kind
that
of
this was
cooled things
episode
out.
20. Until you said it, I forgot it was episode 20, man.
Yeah, we moving along, man. We moving along. I gotta admit, like I said the wrong episode last episode. It was definitely episode
For
19. I said 18 at the
real?
beginning. So, whatever. But yeah, we moving along. Episode 20, man. Here we are. So
Yeah,
we
that's
moving
good,
along.
man. Definitely, like always, we want to thank everybody for watching, listening, supporting. Definitely humble. So please share the videos if you can. If not, continue to like and leave the comments. We definitely appreciate it.
Absolutely. So without further ado, you said leaving comments in the video. So we had another one of our listeners and supporters send in the video for a question for us to answer. We appreciate that. So we're gonna get to that first and foremost. Can you see it, Jay?
Yeah, I got it. It's up.
So my question is, how do you appropriately tell someone they need professional help? So
Okay,
All right, there we
that's a
go.
good question. Um, how do you tell somebody like for them to seek like mental health services or support? I think one thing that you got to consider is that
My fault. Go ahead.
one thing that you got to consider, when you're approaching somebody or you think that they may need some additional support, is that you don't want to embarrass them, right? So isolating the person is usually a good thing, and what I mean by isolate them is you don't want to address mental health. A lot of people are more protective kind of over their mental health record than even their medical records. So you want to approach them in a space where they're comfortable, where you're comfortable, and you're alone, so you have a little bit of privacy. In terms of a strategy to talk to the person, I think a good way to kind of engage the subject is to try to point out the maybe the areas of the person's life where it's presenting them with challenges. That's like a good way to try to broach explaining it. But I think ultimately, especially in the cases of the more extreme mental health, like disorders and symptoms, if it infringes on a person's safety, then you may have to go above and beyond their, like over their head, for lack of a better term, to get them the help they need or intervention. But that's what I would say to start. So, what's your opinion?
I'm gonna highlight the a lot of parts of what you mentioned. Absolutely, the right place, right time to have the conversation is imperative. You want to bring it up in a comfortable or private situation. Definitely one on one, like you mentioned, because like suggesting any type of therapy, that's a sensitive topic. And it can for any reason it can make your loved one or your person that you're recommending for therapy that can make them uncomfortable or even embarrassed if you do it like in a public setting or you do it like in a group atmosphere or environment. So um I highly caution not to mention it or to recommend it like you're in the middle of an argument, right, or in a tense situation. So like if you're having a heated back and forth and you go off and you say, well, you need therapy, like I think that it can be perceived more as a negative, right? It could be more
Right.
perceived as like there's something wrong with you, and you're kind of like an argument tactic as opposed to actually like recommending that this person get it for help. So the timing in the situation, I think, is crucial. And also, if you've gotten that situation, like it's a one-on-one situation, start out with love. I think if when you start with expressing kind of your love for the person and like your support, that you want to see them, like if they've told you about it or however the conversation comes apart, definitely start with how it's coming from a place of love, it's coming from a place of support, and that you hate to see them in distress, right? So if you're doing it in a comfortable manner, because you may not know what that person's view on therapy is, right? A lot of different people
Right.
have a different perception of therapy or different kind of thought process towards it. So I think starting with that, and then, depending on maybe once you maybe brought it up, going from, okay, everybody gets therapy. I think normalizing it, if they're not in a place where they're open to, I think normalizing saying therapy and say, hey, everybody gets it. And give some examples, like athletes need coaches, people, we all need to go see the doctor every once in a while. All these other different things, like when you normalize it, depending on what their reaction is, I think that also can go over well when you're, suggesting somebody get help.
Okay. Um, I think those are all good points. The only thing I would add is just to expect the resistance, right? Because if you expect the resistance, you'll kind of be more prepared to manage your own emotions, right? And not get frustrated. You got to expect some type of response from the person, right? The last thing I will kind of say is don't be afraid. Look at the situation honestly, right? So even if you're somebody's spouse, somebody's family member, brother, sister, mother, the people in their life that they trust the most, right? If it's not you, right? Or if they have a negative reaction to you for whatever reason, engage their circle of support, right? Engage somebody from their circle of support, either to take the lead or to do the intervention, right? If you know that you're not the right person, you got to be honest about that sometimes. Sometimes you may be in a marriage or maybe your sibling and they need help, but their best friend is the person they listen to, or their girlfriend, or or their favorite uncle, or their mom, right? And if that person is not you, you might be a trigger for whatever reason. Even if you love the person, they love you, then you might want to want somebody from their circle of support to help.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Like we've talked about it in the past, and we've talked about it with our clients and our patients, the communication aspect and how the message is being relayed makes all the difference. So like you said, if the
Right.
person has a better rapport, a better relation, maybe with their brother or with one of their best friends, the message might be better coming from them. What I'll also add is, if you've been to therapy, this might be a decent time for you to share your own experience. So again, kind of normalizing and saying, hey, it benefited me, and kind of demystifying what therapy looks like, because therapy can be very mysterious for a number of different reasons, due to confidentiality, all these other different things. And so if you share like, hey, I was in therapy, it worked for me, this is how it helped me, this is how it changed me, all these other different things, that might also provide support, or provide, maybe some motivation for that person. And then also, again, it's just kind of saying, hey, like I'm proposing this because of X, Y, and Z, right? Sometimes we also got to provide some additional reasoning and say, hey, I've noticed this is taking place, or I've noticed this. I want you to do well. I want us to do well. However, and so in addition to starting off with love, it's like, hey, I want you to, I'm saying this to you for X amount of reasons. Like, and it's also coming from that love part. But like you said, man, you have to understand that people may not also react well to it. And we have to accept that. We have to accept that, what, this person may not want to go through with it, and that's okay. It's no, you want to caution them not also to put the blame on them if the person is not receptive to it, and understanding that any individual has a right to say no or not to want to go to therapy too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fact, and that's kind of like, why I said, in terms of the suggestion, and engage in their circle of support, right? Because you know, people are going to be resistant, so you got to expect that. And in order to give yourself the best chance and that person getting the treatment they need, you want them to hear the message. And if you're not a good messenger, then you want to find somebody that is.
Right. Makes all the difference in the world. So, but really good question. Hopefully this was helpful for you. For any follow-up, absolutely, you know, send another video, add comments. Yeah, thank you for sending that video in and watching and listening. This to everyone else, if you have any questions like that or about anything else regarding mental health, regarding therapy, or regarding any insight that you guys have some questions about, you know, send a video, email us at the Black Psychologist Podcast at gmail.com. You know, so the phone lines are always open. Dr. J and we want to help you out, want to answer some questions.
Right.
All right. All right. So earlier, Jay, I called you the Heartbreak Kid. And I'm going to get into the reason why. So an article recently came across of why the slow fade is worse than ghosting. All right. So what do you think? You think, in your opinion, before we get into it, what's worse, ghosting or the slow fade? What do you think?
I think the slow fade is probably worse in the long run. Ghosting will probably feel worse in the immediate sense, right? In the moment. But in the long run, I think the slow fade is going to be worse because it's going to make you feel like a fool, you know? It's going to make you feel, you know, kind of like misled.
All right. See, I think, you know, again, before we get into I'm initially, I feel or believe that the ghosting is, you know, more tough because it's so abrupt, right? And it leaves like a lot of uncertainty, but we'll get into it. So so for people that don't know what the slow fade is, I'm going to describe it. So the slow fade is essentially it's a charade where, you know, someone puts on when they've already made the decision to end the relationship, but they don't share that decision with the other party. So instead of telling the other person directly that it's over, they continue to pretend that the relationship is intact while sending mixed signals, and they slowly drift away, and hoping that the other person will take the hint and get the message. So you know, what are your thoughts about this as you read through the article?
See, and that's the thing. Like the problem with the, you know, slow fade is that, and the slowly drifting away is that, again, right? It's a person that wants to have it all, right? So obviously you don't want to be in that relationship anymore, but you don't want the conflict involved with breaking it all.
Mm-hmm.
So you're gonna slowly fade. You're gonna, you know, not call on Monday like you usually do, not call Tuesday, text on Wednesday, you know, check in on Thursday and disappear for the weekend like that, you know. The slow fade, you know. Again, that's why I said in the long run, it's probably more painful, right? Because the person is going to feel misled, right? And you're going to keep feeding the person hope indirectly. So that's why I think, and obviously this comes from, you know, you sending messages that are inconsistent. So that's why I feel like it. And again, I may come off as callous and cold, but I'm more of a fan of the direct method, right? Rip the Band-Aid right off, right? Mm-hmm. You know, just rip it off. Like, you know, it's over. You know what I mean? Give the person a reason, but you tell them it's over, you know, because it hurts worse when you wait.
Cold-blooded, bro. You know?
Yeah, cold-blooded, baby.
I was thinking, and like you said, you know, a lot of people that use the slow fade, they tend to, you know, when they have realized that the relationship is over, like you said, they probably sometimes think that they're actually being kind by not telling the person, right? So they say, right, let me slowly do it, then like abruptly. And I see that aspect, that the thinking is flawed or it's not really accurate, because like you said, in the long term, you're really kind of dragging the person on. But then I'm thinking of the other side of it, of, you know, when you ghost somebody and you abruptly end it, there's like, it leaves a lot of uncertainty, right? It leaves like, it's just like, I feel like the individual that's being ghosted is like, well, what did I do? Right? is there something wrong with me? You know, we talked about this like way in the beginning of the pod of like, you know, you just were, you know, you maybe just went that person's flavor and they just like, all right, well, cool. I'm not gonna hit them up. I'm just gonna roll out on them. And now that leaves the other
Right.
person like, well, I don't know. Now the racing thoughts, all these different things kind of start to come into play. And like with the ghosting, I feel like you know, that person is just kind of left like kind of holding it back, like
So
really
you
nothing.
prefer the slow fade. That's
I
what you're
you know,
saying.
I don't prefer. Yeah, you know,
Yo,
I don't.
listen, man. I already told you I'm a rip the band-aid off type of person. You know, I chose a side. So what are you saying?
So all right. So here's the thing, also, right? So like the article says, like the slow fade is gaslighting, also, right? Because like again, you're causing that person to kind of, you know, you're dragging them on and you're kind of giving them hope, or maybe when it's not. And then at the same time, I'm not trying to sound callous either, but I know I'll probably get killed for this. I also do believe that there is, I guess it depends on the slow fade. Let me say that. All right,
Okay.
because you got the slow fade where someone is just saying, maybe just kind of dragging them on, but then there's also the slow fade where, like you said, the inconsistency, and if someone's reaching out, right, if they're just like, hey, you know what, let's go get something to eat, and the other party's like, nah, I'm cool, something came up, right? 2 days later they're like, hey, you want to go see a movie, and the other party's like, no, I'm good, you know, something else came up. I do feel like maybe by like the third or fourth, um you know, kind of turn down or rejection, either a conversation should take place, or I'm not saying the other person should take a hint, but I do feel like those are some flags when you're starting to kind of see. So I'm not putting it on the slow, you know, the person who's getting slow faded, that they should be like, however, I do feel like there are some flags that could, you know, someone couldn't notice or be aware of.
So so that's where we kind of go into a gray area, right? Because some people, if you're talking about a person reading the signs and being
Right.
able to say like, okay, well, this person's obviously not interested in me anymore, right? That's
Right.
a very logical thing, but when you got emotions, the heart wants what the heart wants, right? Male or female, right? I've seen both, you know, genders do it. You know, some people just won't accept no, especially when you're still in contact with them and still being nice to them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so some people will legitimately put you in a situation where you feel like you either got to ghost them or you're gonna have to be mean to them, right? Because, and I'm not promoting that, but what I'm saying is, for some people, the slow fade wouldn't even work because they're gonna be like, well, what about this? What about that? Or they're gonna, you know, perceive you still reaching out to them as there's still hope. You know what I mean?
Right.
So what I said when I what I mean by make you be mean is their perception of you being mean is going to be like, listen, I'm not interested, right? They're going to perceive that as you being mean. But for you, you may look at it just like you said before. You may be, well, for the last 3 weeks, I've been saying I can't go eat. I'm too busy to do this. I'm too busy to do that. And you gave them all the signs. So that's why I was asking you, like, I guess, is it dependent on time?
You see, I think that's another question, right? You also got to consider how long, you know, you've been dating or you've been with the person.
Well,
So I think that's something else we have to consider.
see, I think that comes into play, especially when you're talking about ghosting, right? Because when we had this conversation before, I perfectly think ghosting is acceptable, like perfectly acceptable, especially if you're talking about like social media dating apps, people like you're just texting back and forth with. You know, I don't know the latest dating apps, but you're texting back and forth with them for a few days, hours, a week, whatever.
Right.
I don't know that they deserve a sit down. You understand what I'm saying? Um, so what is the limit? Because again, in an article, they were saying after a few dates, you could send somebody a text like, nice to meet you, but I don't feel the connection, and just move on with your life. That's what they're saying. After a few dates is appropriate. So what do you think, man? Like the Seinfeld episode, right? Like, after how many dates do you have to sit down face to face and talk to a person, or can you text them, or what's the limit? Because they're saying a few dates, you can text somebody, nice to meet you, I don't feel the connection. You know, some people may feel like after a few dates, you gotta have a real conversation face to face at least.
Well, I mean, if you ghost, let me ask you this: how do you ghost? Right? When you ghost, is it like, yo, like is it the joint like you, or like when you say, yo, I'm ripping the Band-Aid off? Is it like you just sending a text like, hey, nah, we can't, we ain't kicking
When I was
anymore?
talking about ripping the Band-Aid off, that's like it coming out of your mouth, like it's not working out. And
Okay.
I don't, for whatever reason, I don't want to be in a relationship no more. I don't want to be in a relationship no more. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that gives you that's not giving the other person wiggle room to, rope you back in, for lack of a better term. It's like, I don't want to be in a relationship no more. Every time a woman broke up with me, they didn't give me no leg room to get back. They said, listen, I'm not in that space no more. Me. So I didn't have a choice in the matter. You know what I'm saying? So that's, that's not ghosting to me. That's just ending a relationship. To me, ghosting is something that occurs like on a dating app or something. Like you may be talking to somebody for a couple of days and then you meet somebody else, or you're not interested no more, and you don't talk to them no more. And I mean, that makes, I know for some people, that may be very disappointing, you know what I mean? But in the world of dating apps, you're probably not the only person they're talking to anyway. They're texting probably with a lot of people, So I don't know. What do you think?
I think, it comes to play. One, I don't think it needs to be in person, right? So to answer your question earlier, like I'm not meeting with anybody in person. I mean, unless the relationship is serious, I'm not meeting with anybody. Like if we've just been texting kind of back and forth, dating app or what have you, something to that extent, I'm not meeting you in person to break up with you or to say like, listen, like, it'll just be a situation.
Cold-blooded.
Hey, what do I gotta go out for now? I gotta go spend money to break up with you? Is that how that works?
Yo, I don't believe in that.
Yeah,
so spending money to break up with somebody, that's crazy.
Yeah, like we let's go to Starbucks. I gotta gas up the car to go out the. No, I'm not doing that. That's inconvenient, but not doing that. I do feel like this is where technology comes into place, where absolutely you should communicate. So that's all jokes aside, and I think that's where the issue comes in with the slow fade and ghosting. Is that an explanation, right? People want to know why. Like, okay,
right.
like why is this happening? Even though you're saying, and because that's usually the follow-up question. Like, even in when you, like you mentioned, when you say, oh, well, for me, it's not working out, or people want to know why, right? Because if they don't feel the same way, it's like, well, it's something I did, something, am I not this? And then the long line of questions starts to kind of rattle through the brain of, and they want to know why. They want some type of explanation of why they're being treated in such a why the relationship's ending. So I absolutely do feel communication is key with this. Like you do, depending on how long you've been with the person, letting them know and say, hey, I'm not on the same page as you. Whether how much you want to go into that detailed explanation is totally, up to you. But I'm not meeting in person. No, absolutely not.
Hey man, I agree with you, man. The communicating at that part is the most important. The why, that's kind of the gray area, because even if you tell the person why, they might not accept it. You might not even fully know why. It might just be a feeling, but communicating to the person that your portion in terms of where you stand, the relationship is over, you know what I mean? That's the main part,
Absolutely. So also just a little caveat, you don't know how that person's going to react. So you don't want to be in a public place that thing goes left.
Oh yeah, man.
No, we can't have that. All right. So if you are able to manage to survive not getting ghosted or slow faded, you might actually make it to the altar. So if you've made it to the altar, once you've said your I do's, you might think that, you're basking in that easy breezy glow for the foreseeable future, right? However, after, you said the I do's, changes tend to arise when two lives join together, and, that can create for some choppy waters, depending on how your setup is. So we came across an article where some relationship experts or relationship therapists shared the common fights that couples tend to have during their first year of marriage, and they provided some recommendations on how to navigate these issues. So we're going to read through all of them, but we're only going to highlight just the three of them that tend to be most popular, right? So the first fight, or first common fight that that newlyweds tend to have, is the "what happened to our sex life" fight. So that was number one. Number two is the "when are we going to have a baby" fight. All right. Coming in
Yeah.
at number three is the "we need some better boundaries" fight. Number four, the "I'm sick of cleaning up after you" fight. Number five, how do we split up the holidays fight. Number six, hold on, where am I? The "what goes where" fight. And coming in at number seven, the "you're not good with money" fight. All right.
Hmm.
So those are the top seven issues or fights that newlyweds tend to experience during their first year of marriage. And like I said, we're going to highlight just a few of them. And we're going to start off with number three, the "what happened to our sex life" fight. All right. So this seems that many couples experience a dip in their sex lives during the first year of marriage. What's your take on this, Jack?
This was very confusing to me. Admittedly, I'm not married, but it's very confusing to me because I would just think, from a personal standpoint, you would kind of be locked in from the romance aspect during your first year of marriage. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I thought it was game
if
time.
not, if for nothing else, because the quote unquote honeymoon period is probably going is half of the first year of marriage. You know what I mean? I mean, just in terms of adjusting to just life together, I don't know. For some people, moving in, living together, um, you know, full time. I don't know. I don't understand what causes this. But what I will say is, I think it's one of the most dangerous fights to have in your first year of marriage. Because I think sex is very important to a relationship. It's even more important to me to a marriage. It's not the most important thing. I'm not saying it's the most important thing, but I think people undervalue how important being sexually satisfied is within your relationship. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think if in the first year, you're not satisfied, I think, or if your sex life kind of is deflated over the first year, I think it's a good chance that you and your partner, don't have open communication when it comes to, what satisfies you guys, or what, for lack of a better term, the other person requires, to be comfortable in that sense, right? But I think it's something that, if you're not comfortable talking about, you need to get help with talking about, right? You need to get a mediator, somebody to help you talk about it, because, man, sex, like a few other key things on this list, in my humble opinion, will tear your relationship apart quicker than any outside forces ever will, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, got to be physically satisfied with your partner. I don't know. What do you think?
Um, so I know that this is not an uncommon issue that takes place in marriages, right? That the sex life will start to dwindle. And then, like you mentioned, that creates a host of issues. What I was thinking that could contribute to a sex life decreasing during the first year is that nowadays, or in this more modern era, you have a lot of couples that have been together for an extended period of time, right? Prior to marriage. A lot of couples are already living with each other. A lot of couples are sometimes already have children. So I'm thinking that the sex life is already, or maybe previously, possibly, like where you didn't have as much access or time with each other, like years or generations ago. That yeah, okay, when you get married, now everybody's under one roof, and things are happening, more frequently. But now I feel like by the time you've gotten married, depending on the relationship, you've been together for a significant or at least a decent amount of time. So your sex life is already, by that time, already, it's already bumping. So I'm thinking that possibly if you've been together 4 or 5 years and then you get married by the fifth year or so, like you're already kind of into it. So the newlywed phase is already kind of taking its course, especially if you're moved in with each other. So I'm thinking that like maybe because you've already had so much access and you've already had that period where it was happening like so frequently and everybody was so into each other and everything was so intense, that maybe that's contributing to the sexual passion dying down. So that's what I thought.
Well, I mean, the groups that we're talking about is definitely important, right? Because
Right.
if you're talking about a couple who's been living together for 7 years and now they're like, all right, we're gonna decide to just go on, we're gonna go get married. You know what I mean? And they're coming right back to the same setting that they were sharing before. To me, that's different than two people, you know what I mean, who were dating 2 years, are living in separate places,
Yeah.
come together to get married, move into their own place for the same first time. That's a way different situation than people, for lack of a better term, that are like playing house or whatever you want to call it, no disrespect to nobody, but living together, cohabitating, right? You know what I mean? It's different if you're doing that first um, because you're essentially behaving in that role without the paperwork or whatever it is. So, like you said, you can't essentially count the day you kind of get the official paperwork as the honeymoon period. The honeymoon period was 6 months ago,
Right.
or 6 years ago when y'all moved in. You know what I mean? So you got to kind of, if you think about and remember that period, I'm sure the sex life wasn't depleted because everything was, new and novel around you. So I think when you bring that up, that's a very important point. And we should kind of consider what groups we talking about. But either way, in the first year of marriage, to be experiencing problems in your sex life, I think it's a very big red flag.
Yeah, I think ongoing conversation I think can mitigate this particular issue. Having that open conversation, like you mentioned, of what your partner is into, what their needs are, and
Right.
being really as much as in tune to their sexual desires as possible. Like I said, it's a very important aspect or factor in any marriage, and if you're noticing things aren't happening as frequently, and it could be due to work, it could be due to if you have a kid, all these other different factors that could affect the sex life, then a conversation definitely needs to take place.
Oh
'Cause,
yeah.
yeah, that'll start just the domino effect of other issues. And then just being open, right? Being open to that feedback about what your spouse is, what they're getting, what they're not getting. I think that plays an important role. But yeah, absolutely. Red flag if that comes up in the first year. All right,
Yeah.
number 3, we need some better boundaries fight. So this refers to when you have a married couple and during that first year, you have a lot of outside input, right? You have family members, you have friends, kind of asserting their input into the marriage as far as asking questions like, oh, when y'all going to have a baby, or when y'all going to do
Mhm.
this, or giving all types of maybe solicited or unsolicited advice. And
Right.
uh, and that's where, that's where the issues start to arise when you're not setting boundaries around your marriage and you're letting all these other different outside or external forces and factors have input. What's your take on this?
I thought this was the most complicated one to me, only because when you're talking about boundaries, the first thing I kept talking about was like, all right, thinking about was like, okay, family members by the house, borrowing money, that type of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because what was once one person's essentially becomes two people, right? Or two people have access to it at least, right? So I think it's just a tough one because it's a lot of factors, like cultural factors. Culture is definitely a factor.
That's true.
Because you got some cultures where you marry people, you marry their family, right? So you may be the type of person that you like, yo, my house is my house. Like, I don't want your cousins and your aunts coming to stay here. If they come to New Jersey, we can hang out all day, but they're gonna sleep in a hotel. You know what I mean? Some people culture, that's an insult if family doesn't come stay at your house or eat at your house, or in other cultures, you know, family comes to your house and they can kind of take over your home, right? Some people don't, you know, aren't gonna like that, right? And then personality will factor in. You know, you've seen the movie Baby Boy, right? So you got some people got different personalities where it's like you may marry somebody and it's like, well, yeah, but I don't want your mama over here, you know, cleaning and cooking and she over here every day. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that type of stuff. When we talk about boundaries, when you're merging essentially two lives into one, all of those things aren't necessarily considered all the time. You know what I mean? So when you talk about culture or family, personality, I think that makes one of the more difficult ones. I think it gets sorted through a lot easier than the other ones because, you know, same way you don't pick your regular family, you don't pick your extended family. You know what I'm saying? So I think people sort through those things, you know, or they find their way a little better. But it could get rough, man. It can get rough, you know.
Yeah, it can get out of hand real fast. And it can put a strain on your marriage, right? If you're not setting these healthy boundaries, because it could be either physically, like you said, you could have a family member, and depending on the culture, they could always be at the house, right? Or it could be a situation where you can have, as they always say, the mama's boy, right? So if you have a situation where, you know, the husband, maybe their mom is always over cooking, doing other different things, and the wife is like, hey, like your mom's always here, right? Because even though they have that close relationship, so it could be a physical aspect, like you said, where people are intrusive and in the house, or it could be an emotional or verbal thing, right? Where you're getting advice, right? Family members are like, yeah, well, you know, my mom said that we should do this, or, you know, auntie or grandma said we should do this, or everyone starts to have their input, and that can also affect the well-being of a marriage if you're not putting these boundaries in. And so, you know, you really have to be cautious when you're you know, soliciting input or advice. If like you're having issues in the marriage or something comes up and people start giving all these tips and all these advice, and because, you know, that may not be received on you very well on either party. So I feel like it could be physical or it could be emotional or verbal. Yeah, you have to protect the sanctity of your family, right? This is your family. This is the family that you created. And yeah, you really have to incorporate some boundaries in on both avenues of things. But like you said, it can be difficult if it's a cultural situation, or if family members are going through a difficult time and they're always over. Like, is there, like you said, there are a lot of factors. However, you have to protect your sanctity. You have to protect your relationship because it'll start to impose and you know.
And you know, some family members always going through a difficult time, especially when they think you got it. You know what I'm saying?
Listen,
they always going through a difficult time.
always, man. If you're the go-to person, right? Like if you're the go-to cousin, or your wife or your spouse is the go-to individual that everybody, you know, they're the problem solver of the family, or, you know, like, yeah, like as the partner, like, yeah, that's gonna start to, you know, really wear and tear on that relationship. Like you said, phone calls, interruptions, all these other different things that are taking place, and, you know, now your relationship and your marriage has gotten interrupted in the process.
Right.
So absolutely want to be attentive and have these boundaries set up to safeguard that. All right. So you mentioned that example earlier in the previous issue where you talking about borrowing some money, right?
Yeah.
And number 7, you are not good with money fight. Yeah, money is notoriously touchy, it's thorny, it's a very contentious subject for a lot of couples, and especially after you get married and you're combining incomes. Opening a joint bank account, right? You're saving together, all these other different things. And when you're starting to combine finances, like that can become, if you're on two different pages, that can become a real issue. So take us through what your thoughts were with that.
Listen, a lot of people may not like my thoughts on this, but I stand on how I feel. Like financial instability up there with infidelity is one of the top reasons for divorce.
Mm-hmm.
To me, there's really less of an excuse for it, because these are things that you should sort out before you get married. Just like somebody's idea of children. Do they want them? How many they want? If you're getting married to somebody and you're unsure of their ideas of these things, not only should you not be getting married, you don't really know the person that well. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know what idea you're marrying. If you're walking down the aisle with somebody and you don't know whether they want to purchase a home, whether they're a good saver, whether they spend all their money, on frivolous things, what do you really know about the person? You don't know whether they want to have children. Well, so that's the first thing. It's one of the biggest causes of divorce, and it's preventable, right? Because these are things you should sort out first. But most importantly, I think it should impact, it's almost as important as who you have children with, right? How responsible somebody is with money, because it impacts generational wealth. Mm-hmm. So if you see somebody that's financially irresponsible, right? It should be as unattractive as somebody that's unattractive to you. You understand what I'm saying? Because it impacts generational wealth. That's going to impact your kids, your grandkids, where you live. Now, I'm not saying marry somebody because they have money and then don't have money. So
that's what it sounds like, Jay. That's what it sounds like.
But let's be clear. We're talking about somebody's perception, right? Are they a saver or are they a spender, right? Are they thinking about building generational wealth and passive income streams, or are they thinking about spending? You understand what I'm saying? That's what I mean. So that should be just as important as all the other things you consider when you have children with somebody or marry somebody. That's all. That's my only point. Because it impacts generational wealth.
Yeah, I feel like this. Yeah, I truly believe that this this issue is an ongoing conversation that needs to take place all throughout the relationship, especially when you become serious with that person. It's just as like we talked about, sex should be that ongoing conversation that you continue to tap in, you continue to, have that ongoing dialogue. Because you know what, especially as you start to say, hey, I want to spend the life with this person. And when things become, legal and paperwork is signed, like you want to know, okay, this person, what debt they have, right? You want to know their credit score. You want to know all of these other different things, like you said, their spending habits, all of these other different things, because that's about to be lumped in with yours. You're about to be, responsible, be in the same boat as this individual. And if you're trying to save up for a house, or like you said, have kids, or all tuition, all these other different things that are going to be needed in a joint effort. Yeah, absolutely. You want to know ahead of time, and you also want to continue to know, like, okay, how's this person spending habits, their debt, like where are they at with things? Okay, because if you don't have transparency and honesty when it comes to money, you're gonna fall right into that category, like you mentioned, of that divorce, right? You're more likely, or you have a higher probability of falling victim, unfortunately, to divorce due to financial issues. And so, money matters. Like they have to be practical with things. You have to have this ongoing conversation, this dialogue about, hey, how are we spending money? What are your plans? Like, where are we at with that? Because once things become combined, listen, So that's a conversation or an issue or a topic that continuously needs to take place within, especially before you get married, definitely after you get married, and as you continue to go along and whatever plans that you guys have as a family, it's going to involve money anyway. So if you're not in the loop with that, if you're not having that open communication, this is where a lot of errors start to take place.
Only because again, when we say money is important, it is. And why is it important? Because you can't have two people that are working against each other. You can't have one person that's trying to save and the other person that's a spender. You know what I mean? You gotta have people, you gotta be on the same page, if you kind of want to make progress in terms of as a team. And that's kind of what a marriage is. So finances are important. And I think a lot of people approach it with like a wait and see attitude, or he or she will change type of attitude. And, they end up years into a marriage, and they're dealing with additional stress that could have been avoided just by either kind of reading the signs or, having clear, goals,
So there you go. Those are the top three, things on the list by newlyweds that we thought were important to highlight. So yeah, absolutely. If you guys are listening, you want us to get to the other ones that we didn't talk about, send us a message, comment, and we'll swing back around to it. All right. So now we're going to switch gears and talk about music. All right. So we've talked about in the past different musicians and how music is affected, and as far as it associates with mental health. So recently, a biographer for Ray Charles, the late great Ray Charles, David Ritz, was talking about how a lot of people are knowledgeable about Ray Charles, his background, his history, and a lot of the trauma that he experienced due to losing his eyesight. I think at age 7, he had also witnessed, before losing his eyesight, his brother passing away in a drowning accident. And so a lot of people attribute the trauma and some of his adult issues and struggles with substance use and other different things as a correlation or contributed from his trauma with being blind and losing his brother. However, David Ritz mentions in this article that Ray Charles attributes his early nervous breakdown and trauma due to his mother's passing when he was a teenager. So what was your take on this, Jay, as you were reading through this?
Listen, I thought it was a good point, right? Because again, he went to go to the school at 7, right? And they said at the school, while he was at the school, he lost his mother. So sometime between the age of 7 and when he was a teenager, he lost his mom, somewhere between that time. Right?
Yeah, I think it was like 13 or 14, I think, around that time when he lost her.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, I think one thing that we talk about, even though he was a teenager, when we talk about ruptured attachments, I think that's part of trauma that's kind of overlooked a lot, especially when we talk about a child. He's still an adolescent, right? Already with a disability, already has lost a sibling, and they lose a primary caregiver, right? So when we talk about kind of like developmental trauma, I know he's a little older, you know what I mean? But he did, he had been in an out of home placement since 7 years old. You know what I mean? So with the disability, with what he has seen with his brother, with that separation from the home environment, without the loss of his primary caregiver, there's a lot of smoke there in terms of developmental trauma already. You know what I mean? So what I would say about it is that's something that we overlook a lot, right? And I think it underlines again how we should look at trauma differently, right? Because somebody doesn't have to be shot, doesn't have to see an accident, doesn't have to be hit by a car to experience trauma, right? So all of these children, right? If you're a teacher and you have children who are in your class who are in out-of-home foster placements, they've experienced trauma. If you have kids who've lost a caregiver, or they have a caregiver who's sick with a chronic illness, they've experienced trauma, right? These are things, or they've been removed for an extended period of time. So I think it kind of highlights another part, of trauma that definitely impacts people across the lifetime that we don't kind of look at all the time.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about developmental trauma, I mean, you have to also look at the background. He grew up in the South, in the segregated South. They were dirt poor. And I believe one of the things that contributed to him to his blindness is because I think it was due to glaucoma, and because they're dirt poor, it's not like they had access to medical care. So in addition to one, you have the social economic aspect of it. You have a situation where you lost your brother, like you mentioned. You're going blind. Like developmental trauma, complicated trauma, right? Or complex trauma, right? So you have
Right.
all of these other different things that he's battling with, in addition to, you know, all the other issues that in the South. So we also take a look at, because we're talking about grief, we talk about grief is individualized. And so there are so many different things that can complicate grief for any particular individual. So he had a really close relationship with his mother. I mean, his mother,
Right.
one, was a strong individual. I mean, she had him at 15. She experienced her own medical issues because I believe for the majority of her adulthood, when she was alive, she had some health issues because I think she walked with a cane. So,
Okay.
but she, like, they had a very close relationship. Like, he has said it in a lot of different interviews and in the movie and through his biographer, that he attributes his mother for the reason why he is who he was, right? To have him becoming that composer. Like, she didn't
Right.
allow him to get down on himself when he became blind, right? She said, listen, I think the quote is something like, hey, you're blind, but you're not dumb, right? You can
Right.
still go and do things. She's the one who worked so hard, and even though they were poor, she like worked her ass off and found a way to send him to that Florida school for the deaf and blind in St. Augustine. Like, that's not a school that wasn't easy for him to get into, given his background, one, given his race, and then also given the money that they didn't have. But she
Right.
found a way, right? So that is already speaking volumes about their relationship. And I think while he was at the school, that's when he found out that his mother had passed. So I don't believe he was there when it took place. So
No, no, no. I don't believe he was there. They said he was, gone. And he kind of described. He used the words "nervous breakdown," talking about not being able to speak, eat,
right.
sleep, all of those things. And listen, it's reflected, right, in all of the. Obviously, we have to consider context, right?
Mhm.
Like you said, in terms of the world, in terms of the state he was living in terms of that the time period he was living in. But we still know that it was still maladaptive coping, right? And that's
Sure.
present all throughout his life in terms of the substance use, and the heroin use and the alcoholism and all of those things. Of course, we want to consider that. Obviously, we want to consider the context in which that occurred.
I mean, like,
So we know.
think about getting that phone call, bro. Like, if you're away and you get that phone call that your mom has passed, like, I can only imagine. Again, that's another factor that can complicate grief. Like, when, like you said, he went through the motions where he wasn't eating, he wasn't sleeping, all these other different factors or symptoms that he was experiencing. Like that, that's a huge blow. And that's why he said, like, he knew that his world had ended.
Yeah, I mean, listen, that's like I said, that's when we talk about specific types of trauma, the loss of a primary caregiver, that's a big thing,
Mhm.
and during your adolescent years, it can be just as impactful as if you lose them, obviously during childhood. So um, it's a big deal. There's a reason. There's a reason why he called it a nervous breakdown, right? Because if we think about this man, he had been through so much more. For him to pinpoint this one period, is obviously very important. So
Mhm.
um, again, it just shows how one thing, like the loss of his mother, affects his ability to manage his emotions, his ability to cope appropriately, his relationships, his interpersonal relationships, all of those things, right, are affected by these few experiences that occurred when he was an adolescent. So again, it's just we need to deal with trauma,
Like
right?
you said,
We need to deal with it.
like you said, the loss of a caretaker, could absolutely be a catalyst, to ongoing things, to trauma. And I didn't know he actually wrote a song. He has a song called Mother, that he has on one of his albums. And I was listening to it, and I was looking at the lyrics, and it's a pretty powerful song and very strong bond. That's just what it personifies, that he has a very strong bond, a really strong relationship with his mother. And yeah, I mean, it's something that we really, like you said, we have to be more aware of, and we have to start to take in consideration when you see what a child is going through, when you see the behaviors. Okay, what's happening behind the scenes, right? Because a lot of kids are, unfortunately, have experienced so much trauma, just like we've talked about in previous episodes, just on their way to school, right? Just
Oh yeah.
walking in the door. So much is going on and what they're going through in their day-to-day life. So but this was a good read. I'm happy you sent across our desk. This was good. All right, so
Yeah, no
staying in the
doubt.
music world, we're going to fast forward, all right, to my guy T-Pain. All right, my guy, your guy, popular guy. All right. All right, so T-Pain recently on the episode of This Is Pop, right? This Is Pop is a Netflix series, and it talks about just kind of different elements or different subjects in music. And so they were talking about auto tune. So we all know, and we're all familiar with T-Pain with being one of the I don't want to say pioneers of it, because it was used prior to him, but he definitely made it more popular in the past 10-15 years. And so he recently opened up about his lengthy battle with depression, which he states began after Usher allegedly insulted his music. All right. So I'm going to paint the picture for you. All right. So he mentions, and he mentions that he was on, this is like 2013, maybe 2014 or so. And he mentioned that he was on a commercial flight. He was in first class, and he said that he was kind of enjoying the flight, maybe sleep or something to that knowledge. And he said the stewardess or the flight attendant taps him on the shoulder and was like, "Hey, Usher wants to talk to you." Right. So Usher was on the same flight in first class. He's like, "Yo, Usher wants to talk to you." So he goes back there. It's Usher, right? So he goes back there, and he says they kind of make quick kind of some small talk to how you doing, hey, how are you type thing. And then he says, Usher was like, "Hey man, you kind of fucked up music for real singers." And he said,
Yo.
"Look," and he said he thought he was joking at first. And he said, "No." And then he saw the tone in his face, and he said, "Nah, yeah, you kind of fucked up music, for real singers." And he said, he has so much respect for Usher, and he said that just started like a downward spiral of um of depression and him questioning himself. And he's really started to question himself whether he really did fuck up music. So what do you think about this, Jeff?
I mean, if this is true, right? You gotta take it with a grain of salt. If it's true, come on, man. Usher was just hating. Obviously, he was mad because T-Pain was getting a lot of bags at that point. He was getting a lot of money. He was very popular. He was riding a wave. And more importantly, like I think T-Pain made the point himself. He was like, I did auto-tune. He was like, I ain't tell everybody to do it, right? And that's what Usher was really mad about. I don't think he would have been mad if T-Pain had his own lane and was getting as much money as he did. But then you had Wayne, Lil Wayne picked up the auto-tune.
Kanye
Then you
picked it
had
up.
people like Ron Browse, all these people, right? Making Kanye, made 808s and Heartbreak, all of that. So you had people that felt like they could do a lot more in-house because they didn't need to bring singers in no more. You know what I'm saying? Or for that period. I could just do it myself. I just do the lyrics and tune it up.
Yep.
So Usher probably felt his pockets getting a little lighter, So like most people, he started hating, But what do you want me to say? Like, he ended up. They said in the article that he ended up putting out a #1 song with auto-tune after that.
Yeah,
So I mean, come on.
because that was my thing. I was like, wait, is this the same Usher that came out with what was that song? the OMG, remember the
Yeah,
joint with him and oh my God,
yeah,
I'm
see what
like,
I'm saying?
yeah. So I'm like, well, wait a minute. I just want to make sure. We're just checking, right? Um, yeah, I feel like I mean, this is tough. I mean, I think the take home message is one, you never know what you're saying and how it can affect people. You know,
Right,
Usher is a highly respected individual. Everybody, we know Usher's catalog. So if you're an R&B singer and you have a newer artist, or I mean, I don't know how new it was, like 2013 for T-Pain, but you have a newer artist, and obviously you have artists that look up to you. You're Usher, right? You've been out for years, and megastar, success, and for you to again wasn't there on the plane, but if you're going by how T-Pain, his account of it, you're saying that to an artist and you're Usher, like that's gonna have an impact on somebody. I can't
right,
sit here and speak and say, yeah, that solely contributed to his depression. I don't know.
right.
I feel like it probably around that time, T-Pain had already experienced a lot of backlash. Remember, it was the death of autotune. You had a lot of other different rappers that were, condemning the whole use of autotune. And maybe this was just something that kind of, because it's coming from such a respected figure in the music industry, that it hits even harder. But yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's hate if it's coming across. If you said it in this condescending manner, and you said it with the goal to put this individual down. And it's like we really have to be conscious and more aware of what we say. Right? You never know of you know our impact and how what we say and when we're saying it and who we're saying it to, how it's going to impact another individual, or the effect that it's going to have. Um, so, but I also feel like you said, is really, you know, hypocritical. You're gonna go out and do a song with auto tune, and then you're gonna sit here and criticize this other individual. So, but I mean, it was good that because I watched the whole episode of that segment that, later on, T Pain, with the help of support with his wife and other people, that he started regaining his confidence, and he became more comfortable and said, "Hey, I'm gonna do what I do. Right? I'm gonna continue to do, make music, songwrite, and use this here voice modulator, and continue to make music, and make money." So I'm happy he got to a point eventually through support that he was able to, that he's doing okay mentally and emotionally.
I mean, this is to me is just like you said, it's more about insight. Like you don't really know how you don't know anybody's level of vulnerability,
Right.
and you kind of don't know how your words impact them. So it's just about awareness, right?
Hmm.
Usher is not responsible for T-Pain's depression. You know what I'm saying? That would be ridiculous to say that. You know what I'm saying? That would be like if Steph Curry got depressed if Patrick Ewing told him that he ruined basketball. You know what I'm saying? Like, come on, man. Eras change. The new guy isn't always going to be liked. Um, but it doesn't take away from the original point, right? People have different triggers. Obviously, this is something that T-Pain internalized, so it impacted him. There's somebody else might have let it roll off their back like a duck and be like, yo, he's just hating because I got the bag this month, this year, or whatever. So I think it's more just about awareness, right? Like, of course, we could all be used being nicer to each other and thinking about things before we say it, but more importantly, just like you said, realizing what the weight of your words have on another person, right? So on every level, like so for me and you, if we're working with a student or somebody that that is counting on us for our opinion or our critique, you can be honest with the person, but just knowing, what your words might mean to them, whatever relationship you're in. So, it's a good thing to know.
Absolutely. All right, Jay. Before we get out of here, anything else that we need to get to, discuss, cover?
Nothing really, man. Just again, want to encourage people. We appreciate the videos. Continue to send the videos and the questions. That's about it, man. Appreciate
Yeah,
the support.
absolutely. So, like again, we're on episode 20 due to your support, due to your comments, your feedback. So we appreciate everybody continuing to listen in and watch us on YouTube, listening on all the platform or all the podcast platforms, the iHeartRadios, the Pandora, the Spotify's, Google and Apple podcasts, all of those. So we appreciate everybody listening. And like you said, continue to send videos in to the Black Psychologist Podcast at gmail.com. Watch, listen, comment, subscribe, and we appreciate you guys continuing to tune in and rolling with us. All right, Jay. If nothing else, I'll get at you, bro.
All right, man. Next week, bro.
Yes, sir.